A lot making news today. Stock market taking another hit today. And I guess it was, over the weekend, Saudi Arabia and Russia decided to go at it in the oil market. And prices dropped, and that has had some people talking around the state about what oil prices are at right now and what it may mean for the Texas budget and in the Texas economy moving forward. And you add that in with what's going on with coronavirus. So we decided to bring on a great friend of the program and also a guy who has some answers for us when it comes to the Texas economy, Texas Comptroller Glenn Hegar. As always, Mr. Hegar, it's good to visit with you. Good morning.
Great to be with you again this morning.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Texas economy. I guess before we get into, what it's looking like right now and what the future may hold, tell folks about the budgeting process and what your office kind of goes through when they look at oil prices and they look at the budget and the economy at the very beginning.
Yeah, just to kind of make it real quick and short, the legislature, they come into legislative session in an odd given year. So they'll get there the second Tuesday in January of next year, and then roughly 5 months they'll be there, and they have to put a 2-year budget together, and that 2-year budget will start in September of 2021. So the reverse happened. The exact same thing happened in 2019. So the point being is the current budget cycle, we're not quite one full year into this budget that the legislature passed last year. And so my team, we're constantly monitoring the economy, looking at all streams of revenue that come in the state treasury. But for just kind of simple basic points, a third of our budget is federal dollars, 2/3 are state dollars. Of the state dollars, obviously taxes are the biggest portion, and roughly about 2/3 of all tax collections is either going to be sales tax and or motor vehicle rental sales tax. So point being is sales tax is the biggest driver of the health of the state budget in Texas. And so we constantly monitor it every single given time period. We give them a number that we think the economy's what it's going to do in the next 2 years. They pass a budget, yet we're constantly trying to update them in that process. And just 2 weeks ago, revenues for this year have been a little bit higher than we anticipated when we gave them that number last year during legislative session, which is healthy. And literally a few weeks before all the coronavirus started, and certainly before last week's announcement with Saudi Arabia saying that they're going to increase production, not decrease it, but increase it, which is one reason oil has plummeted starting on Monday morning, as you mentioned in the intro, this kind of war between, not literally, but just a commodity war of pricing and selling oil between Russia and OPEC, and that has caused markets to go down substantially.
So how concerned should Texans be? How concerned are you right now? And we'll take oil prices first, and then we'll get to sales taxes because, like you said, the sales tax is a big issue. Coronavirus, I think, kind of plays into that. But as far as oil goes, how concerned are you, and how concerned should people be right now?
Well, I don't think people should be overly concerned today. Obviously, we don't know the length of this depressed price period for the oil industry. Saudi Arabia and Russia, OPEC could make an agreement tomorrow. I don't think that's very likely. It's going to be a little more prolonged announcement or some type of potential agreement. So I think that obviously if you're in the oil industry, I'd hate to say I'd be a little more concerned in that industry than one of the other industries. If you look at, say, for example, rural Texas commodity prices. I mean, commodities have been low for quite some time, yet with the coronavirus, that's keeping commodity prices overall a little more low. So my point being is, concerned is one thing, panic is a completely different thing. And please understand, Texas went for a very long time as a state. Again, all 254 counties, the economy of Texas, the 10th largest economy in the world, went for a very, very long time with $30 oil, and the state continued to grow. Again, that's as a state, that's not necessarily West Texas, Permian Basin, which obviously depends. So my point is, regionally or industry specific, there should be a little more concern than in others. But again, what I just want to lay out and establish is that Texas as a state, during those low commodity prices, continued to grow and outperform the national economy. And so we think Texas will continue to outperform the national economy. But obviously that growth rate of what we assumed last year is probably going to get downward adjusted later this summer when we do our official cash flow analysis of what the state will need for the next fiscal year starting in September of this year.
What have in the past year, in the past few budgets, what's the sweet spot for the price per barrel of oil?
Yeah, that's a great question, and typically my answer is somewhere around mid-low 50s to mid-60s. I think if you have 55 to 65, really that mid-high 50s is probably the best because those in the Permian Basin can continue to produce and make a profit. However, that's not too overburdensome on the rest of the state economy, which obviously would hope to have lower oil prices. So there's a sweet spot somewhere in there. Obviously, 30 is not a sweet spot, nor is $90. And we've been really kind of in that sweet spot for a while. But, again, the oil industry is really important to the Permian Basin, extremely important to the Eagle Ford Shale area, to different parts of the state. However, again, as a state, we've been able to grow. But one of the points that I continue to make is Texas as a state is 19% of all the exports out of the United States. 19%. I mean, we are very tied to the international market is my point. And so therefore with the coronavirus, having Italy completely locked down, or it was which is 60 million people. 60 million people was locked down in China just not too long ago. I mean, that's essentially the state of Texas population times 2.
Right.
So think about that. 29 million people. So that has impacts on supply chains, people being able to get their products, as we are seeing people kind of going to the store and making, I would think, slightly irrational decisions to stock up, as though, the world is going to significantly decrease tomorrow. The market's probably going to continue to go down a little bit, but hopefully calmer heads are going to prevail at some point, and we'll see the economy continue to grow. Just it's going to be much more moderated than what we thought this fiscal year.
So are we looking at with oil prices where they are, with coronavirus, maybe continue, it probably will continue to grow, and we're seeing it play out in the media. We're seeing more and more cases. I think we just had another case yesterday in the state of Texas. As this continues to grow, are we looking at more of a short-term, I hate to say pain, but short-term issue rather than a long-term issue?
I think that's what obviously we would hope for. Number two, no one knows exactly. I would love to be able to say, yes, that's what we're going to have. I tend to lean on the hope and the expectation that the market's going to calm down here in another week or two. It's going to go up and down for quite a while, for several weeks now, but we'll kind of calm down. We're going to start seeing Italy at some point contain their coronavirus and be able to, reopen their economy per se, and people move around, much like the Wuhan province in China. So I think you're going to continue to see that. One good thing is some experts, and I'm not an expert on viruses, but I mean, it is a virus. It's a very small number of people, unfortunately, tragically pass away from it, but the flu is much more widespread, and we're not appreciating that. And so the point being is, with warmer weather, different things coming into effect, hopefully, this will start trailing off as the number of people infected, and hopefully being able to get back to operations and work.
What type of impact will we see? You're talking about sales tax, you're talking about rental cars, just with so many places canceling events and talking about canceling events. I know Austin is going to take a major hit with losing South by Southwest this year. If this continues to play out in the state, how big of a hit could that be for the state?
Well, it'll be large in certain industry sectors. The number one is travel. Obviously, with airlines, for example, you've seen airline prices decrease substantially, their stock prices, and probably will continue to slightly, because 40% of all airline traffic is vacations. And so people are scaling those back, and or conferences, companies talking about not having travel. They're going to do either by phone and or by video conference, not traveling, trying to limit public exposure. And so those in the tourism, the travel industry, the hospitality, they're going to see a bigger impact. Now, the question becomes, does the impact get so great, which hopefully it will not, to where thereby it begins to impact their employees? Are they able to continue to cash flow even though they may have negative profits this year compared to some other profit margin if the economy was fully operating? But as long as they don't have to start letting go of their employees, who then will begin to have a larger ripple effect. And that's really becomes the question, how far out does that ripple go?
Yeah. Visiting with Texas Comptroller Glenn Hegar here on the Chad Hasty Show. This is almost a prediction, almost just a looking ahead for the next legislative session. When budgets are talked about, when the economy is talked about, how short term does this need to be before we start impacting future years and future budgets, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the biggest thing is we'll be able to have hopefully a little bit more of an answer come the end of this year, because obviously we'll see how long this potentially lasts, or as the coronavirus exists, or something else. Does there something else that replaces, just like the flu? As we begin to warm here in Texas weather and it subsides, the other half of the world, the other part of the hemisphere is cold, and they're going through their wintertime. So, really, realistically, it depends on how deep it is, because obviously any up or down has an impact on the budget. Even if it's marginally, it's going to have an impact on the state budget. And so, I hope that we'll see this kind of a shorter tail to this thing, and then the economy gets back going again, and it hopefully won't have a significant impact on the next budget process.
Yeah,
I think we'll have a little bit more at the end of the year, as we get into this a little bit further.
Yeah,
hopefully be able to answer that question.
A wait and see approach on all of this is the best way to go.
Unfortunately, because I thought when I got this job they had a great crystal ball, but I came to find out they didn't have one in the office. So,
but no, I think that's good though. I think it's good not to be out there and saying, "Hey, this whole thing is falling apart," because that's almost the message that we're getting on the national level, right? That, oh my goodness, everything's falling apart. With what you're saying is, yeah, oil prices are down right now. Those could rebound at any time. Depending on what outside forces do, or the oil market's so tricky. That things can happen in the Middle East that throw things off. So, it is good to have that wait and see approach and just everybody calm down, right? And that's the thing. Everybody needs to take a deep breath. The world is not collapsing. Again, if you're in the oil industry, it's significant to you. If you've been in agriculture and you've had to deal with these low commodity prices, as we've all had. I grew up in a farming family, and my family still is actively engaged in operations. It's impactful to us. But if you look at the rest of the world here in the United States, they go, well, what are you talking about? It hadn't impacted me. So that's the question, is how far out? We've seen sales tax collections in the oil industry have decreased slightly in the last 3 months, but it hasn't had an impact in other industries yet. Now, I think this will probably have impacts, because going from $50-something oil to $30 is going to have an impact, but we just don't know how much. And everybody needs to take a deep breath. Life continues, the economy continues, and we're going to, as we see the things change in the economy, we're going to continue to let people know where the Texas budget is at. That's our job: manage expectations, and let's be reasonable about where we're going. Very good. Texas Comptroller Glenn Hegar, always a pleasure to visit with you, sir. You always got great information for us, and we will visit again soon.
Sounds great. Good to be with you. Have a great day.
Thank you. That's Texas Comptroller Glenn Hegar here on the Chad Hasty Show. News Talk, KFYO.